Sagar, you want to ask the question yourself or us to read it? So he's written that as a junior member or a consultant in an organization, we might not have the voice to drive the thinking of the organization to make use of this framework to make sense of a complex situation, unless an expert or a leader suggests it. What should a consultant do to nudge the decision maker towards this framework?
So the challenge of being a junior person in the organization, you want to try this out. What are some ideas? So what do you guys think? Any feedback on that piece? Like kind of how to, if you want to try this out, you don't have the political clout. What are some ways to put this forward?
Well, maybe you could try it with maybe not the leaders, but maybe a team on maybe a little, like a smaller scale, and get some practice with it and see how it goes. And then, you know, if you can show some little wins, maybe you can, that might help with convincing the higher level leaders, if you will, to give you the leeway to do that.
Yeah, thanks. Anybody else? What else?
In the same vein, what we did, Claire and myself, another who took the training, when they showed how to get out of the complex zone, that you could be either a heretic or you could do like those kind of things, right? So we did almost the same thing to bring it to the organization to get sort of a wider. Like for example, we started doing not only external meetup but internal meetups also. Change the behavior by doing small things.
One thing to consider is, you know, is there a particular kind of methodology or something that your organization currently is kind of subscribed to? And I ask that because, you know, in the mid 90s through, you know, 2015, I was at Motorola. They were really big on Six Sigma. I had a hard time letting go of it because they invented it. And when we were first trying to get some, you know, agile stuff done there and just try and sell it, first of all, we didn't use names or words like Scrum or Extreme anything. We called it process improvement, which was, you know, acceptable on the logo. Yep. And we tried to do some of those first experiments, you know, literally kind of proving the effectiveness of, you know, in a single team situation, in an agile development team as a Six Sigma experiment, which is kind of tricky, but sometimes, you know, if that's the currently accepted lingo and vocabulary and stuff, sometimes you have to start there with that vocabulary and those concepts to help move people, you know, to what you're trying to get them explore. But what you're trying to do also has to be something that can somehow be revealed within the limits of the thing that you're having to use to do it. So.
Yeah, Brad, that's a good example. It's funny, you know, so from Buffalo, like Motorola, like it's funny. A lot of those guys are still around Buffalo, right? So they're not Moog and other companies, and so I run into them all the time at meetings. And but that the example you use is sort of that almost internal sort of parallel process with the language you're going to bring things to where it is a really strong tool that we see that you can do inside. And you don't have to be a senior person, right? You can sort of say, I have this new method or model. Can I almost cloak it in the existing with the sheep and wolf's clothing, right? So, or the wolf and sheep's clothing. Just saying, hey, we are a Six Sigma environment, and then you kind of create a small way, and it seems like the same thing, but you're varying it just enough to create that perturbation on the edge. And they kind of go, hey, what are you guys doing over there? And because you're getting good results. And then you sort of say, hey, can I show you what we're doing? I want to show you. And then and you quietly let it kind of
I've seen the same thing done with Lean as well. In Six Sigma, you had to be careful because you couldn't just assume that DMAIC is the right model. Six Sigma has a few other alternatives there, and you got to make sure you do the analysis to find the right thing. But a lot of these, once they've grown into a, major system, there's some commonality in how they say, hey, look, this is kind of your space or ranges of things that you're trying to apply this to. And so it can help introduce things that way and get some credibility. It's tricky.
Another example I'll use when I was a younger junior person in organizations too, is that a lot of times, like if I found a tool method that worked, I would find, 3 or 4 people who were either on my team or had similar ideas to me. I'd pull them in and we'd say, hey, we're going to develop this small system. I mean, now the fancy term is, we call it, a skunk work or something. Hey, I had this idea. We're going to try this slightly different process in the organization. We're going to test it out and see what happens. And if you have 3 or 4 tight folks with you in the process, you get it done. And then the one thing is, if you're a junior person, you start to figure out ways to kind of work out loud. So then you, without attacking the existing pedagogy of the organization, you you let folks know you're doing things a little different, and you kind of slightly show your work align with process. And that may or may not stick. But it's helpful to do that. I mean, and this is in many ways, it's the same example I used on the Cynefin of the simple, the clear versus the chaos piece, right? So, I mean, I'll use Motorola and Kodak and those companies as an example, right? So, and I'm seeing it right now, manufacturing across a lot of sectors, right? Six Sigma, quality standards, the environment's the same, nothing's shifting. We can just Six Sigma this thing across. And suddenly your whole environment, China increases, Japan increases, manufacturing increases, the world shifts, and suddenly you fall off that cliff and you lose a huge share of your market because you weren't aware the environmental perturbations happen. So
yeah, I think you also touched on something there too. If you can kind of figure out, what's the accepted thing your organization is doing, there's probably some assumptions that things are predicated on in there. And if you can kind of figure out the difference between that and, the kind of problem you're trying to solve, because that was a big thing between with Six Sigma when you were going in the physical world to, the virtual and the software world. It wasn't just there's more uncertainty. It's, stuff is in a different world here. There's physical, tangible, where, biological sciences apply and life sciences and physics. And then, there's the virtual stuff. It's more ruled by complexity and things like, the notion of economies of scale, which is what a lot of the Six Sigma stuff was based on, that I'm trying to produce the exact same set of outputs from the exact same set of inputs, over and over again, because I'm trying to mass produce. That's not what we're doing in software, and that's not what we're doing as things get more and more digital. So if you can kind of figure out what's shifting underneath that, may no longer be valid, what are those predicates, those assumptions, those axioms? In product family stuff, there's something called commonality and variability analysis, which is a lot of syllables for just what we used to do on Sesame Street. Which one of these things is not like the other? How can you find the 7 differences in this picture?
And I think, in some ways, even with, this is why with the Cynefin framework, well, in my mind, it's a conceptual. It's a meta framework. It's also a way of kind of categorizing or understanding how you're going to approach things. So again, I know the sort of final point, and I'll kind of stop the recording in like 2 minutes, but it's sort of saying we have these 5 domains. So you have things that are clear and obvious, but it's always thinking about the decision maker's standpoint. So with Michael's example, if I'm going to go to an executive team, I want to kind of put myself to sort of say, if the executive or the decision maker has to make a choice, what's their framework based upon the process? How do they frame this? Or if I'm a project team lead and I'm leading an agile team, I want to think that people in the room, how do they view the challenge? Because something that's complicated to Michael may be totally complex or chaotic to me, right? I mean, the lawyer example is a great one. So again, the example I used earlier. So my mom's house is in foreclosure. I didn't know what to do. I read the paperwork. I couldn't figure it out, but I knew somebody knew how to fix it. So I went to the lawyer. Lawyer said, no problem. Fixed it in like 5 minutes. So what was complex or chaos to me, to the lawyer was complicated, and she fixed it in a second. And so it's thinking, how is the person going to perceive the issue? Or even like Michael's example of meeting with the senior teams. right? If I've never done that before, to you, it may be relatively clear. Like you walk in, give them the 3 options, walk out, follow the procedure. But to me, maybe I've never experienced it before. So I go into complex and try to do multiple probes in real time to see what's working and capture feedback quickly in the process. So it's always thinking about it from the standpoint of the decision maker or the person that has to make the choice, as opposed to how you frame it, unless you're making the decision yourself.